What took place on the night that we now call Maundy Thursday really wasn't religious. If religion somehow means that stuff with God that's separated from the real stuff of life. If religion means being separated from the life of neighbors and friends, or from the difficulties of politics and tension, if religion means excluding governors and conspirators, or somehow anything that's apart from our real hopes and fears, then that wasn't Maundy Thursday. But what Maundy Thursday was about was where God is most present, and where God speaks, and where God offers us life and purpose. And that's in the real stuff of life. It was a gathering of people who had been together for a number of years now. And we know their names. These are real people in a real situation. You know, we know the brothers, the fishermen, you know, Peter and Andrew, James and John, Matthew, the tax collector. We know there were two guys named Judas. We know where they live. We know where some of them even went to the synagogue. We also know that they were nervous. They've been hearing Jesus talk about coming to Jerusalem, that he was going to be killed there, and they knew that possibility was real. Jesus could get killed. Why not them? We know lots of the details. It's a part of history. We know that the governor there was Pontius Pilate, and we know about his aspirations to get a win in Jerusalem so he could go home and maybe become a senator. We know that the high priest Caiaphas had been set up there because the Romans had deposed his father-in-law, Annas. There was tension between the two. Annas still had lots of power. There was lots of intrigue, and it even comes up in this story on Friday night. We know that the newspapers, had there been, would have told all kinds of stories about tensions with how are we going to get rid of the Romans, or should we be allies with the Romans? And what about the terrorisms and terrorists? And I'm sure it even had it one day where they talked about a terrorist who got caught. His name was Barabbas. We don't commemorate this night because we're trying to go back and repeat history. But like all the scriptures, we take what God has done in the past and how God has spoken, and we turn it so that it sheds light on our community right now. Think about it. A year ago, we didn't get together up in the hall for Maundy Thursday. There was nobody bringing soups and great breads. We didn't see familiar faces and then walk into the church. We were dealing with hopes that the virus was not going to be as dangerous as people said, hopes that all this would be over really soon and we could all get back to regular life. And we were dealing with fears that what if it is as dangerous as they say, and fears about how do we get groceries and how do we connect with people who are stuck in their homes. Last year, we also had lots of disagreements. There was an election coming up, and our country seemed more divided than ever. No one could agree on anything, it seemed. Last year, we did not know what we had ahead of us. And that makes us a little bit like those first disciples, because they had no idea what was in store for their year either. Just a sense of foreboding. Tonight, I wonder, as we picture the disciples once again, that small room with little flickering oil lamps, I wonder if this now, after a year of this disruption, how we will see things differently when we hear this story again. We do know that Jesus knew what was coming. He knew that he had just a few hours before it all began. The betrayal, the arrest, disciples being scattered. He knew that whatever he did that night was of the utmost urgency and importance. So when you listen to what Jesus says on this night, Maundy Thursday, be listening for what he says, because it is the most vital, important thing he can tell them. How is he going to keep them together? How is he going to defend them when he can't be with them? How is he going to keep them on track for their mission? So there was very little time remaining when they were having that dinner. And so what Jesus tells them is the most important two things he had that he could tell them to try to keep the community together and strong and be able to keep them on track for being the community that was called to take on his ministry. And what were those two things? The first was a practice as it demonstrates the kind of love they had to have for one another. Not just get along with each other, but to learn how to love, where love means serving. And the second that he taught them was about this gift that he was giving them, that they were to share together the gift of his body and blood. We've come to relegate foot washing to be a liturgical practice that happens on some Maundy, Thursdays. Priests and deacons symbolically wash feet or have their, as part of, well, what we do as priests, and we're here to call to serve. Jesus was not introducing a liturgical practice. He was commanding them to love one another and defining it by what he did for them. Remember, it was so crazy, the disciples thought. Some of them refused to get their feet washed, Peter. But Jesus was teaching them something. How will you get through the difficulties if you cannot love one another in this way? How will you be the people that represent me if you don't learn to love and serve one another the way I served you? A little bit later, as they were doing the prayers that accompanied the dinner, prayers they would have all been familiar with, Jesus took bread. And he took that bread and he said the regular prayers that they always said, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who's brought forth grain from the earth. Except Jesus that night redefined the bread. He took it, he blessed it, he broke it. And before he passed it, he said, this bread, my body for you. Take it and eat it. And then he took that bread and they passed it around, and every disciple took a piece. One bread, many pieces, all part of the same bread. We've come to think often of communion as being something where we, it's our moment with God. And it's a really holy time, but the context is very different. After the bread was passed and after supper, he took the ceremonial cup of wine, which is on the table, said the prayers, blessed are you, Lord of God, who's brought forth the grape from the fruit of the vine. And after he said that, he held it out to them. And again, like the bread, he redefined it and he said, this cup is my blood, the blood of the new covenant. Take it and drink it in remembrance of me. And they all took the cup. They passed that cup around, every disciple taking part of that cup. This very mystery was really about Jesus sharing his life. I have come to give you all of me, my body and blood for your life, that you together share as part of your community. It was connected to the community on this difficult night. So here we are on this night, gathered after a year of COVID. A year of COVID, where we've been separated from one another. I know when we get together sometimes on those morning worships, or if it's a birthday party where we do a parade in a cars, or you see somebody in a grocery store, it is fabulous just to see one another. So how will being apart affect us once we get back together? And how will this night, a night very similar to what we've gone through, where Jesus took that bread and took that wine and shared it himself for his disciples to be united together around him in a community. A community where people just don't see one another and wave, a community that is known and characterized by a particular kind of love for one another, where they serve, they look to serve one another. How will we reflect on that as we prepare to gather again? It's a beautiful thing what Jesus has done for us. And it's a holy night. But the mystery, the only mystery is that Jesus is making that real in your hearts and my heart tonight together. And even though we're sharing this on Zoom by the Spirit, it's we are still one bread, many pieces, maybe separated, but all part of the one loaf, united in Christ. So tonight, as we continue with this service, may the Lord continue to speak to each one of us about us, our role as disciples, and how much he deeply cares for each one of us, and the extent that we're called to be a community and a fellowship together.